East side, B side, what side are you on?
Good morning. I don't know why I said morning because it's not morning, but you may be listening in the morning. So hello. Hey Adam, how's it going?
And just to cover our bases, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Let's do a throwback to a former episode where we talked about the Truman Show. Y'all take care.
Oh man. So I watched some great stuff this past weekend.
Yeah.
Friday.
So did you get to see Black Panther?
Yes, Friday night.
Okay.
It is long. It's like 3 hours. And can I just tell you real fast though that I went with my daughter and her boyfriend, and she drove, and we're walking back to her car, or we're getting back in her car after the movie, and I look down because I see something on the ground, and I'm like, oh, look it, there's something shiny. Oh, that's my keys. My keys had been sitting on the ground next to her car the entire day.
So, and you weren't even driving; they were just in your pocket, and they fell out. So you wouldn't even have necessarily noticed if you got it and hadn't seen them reflecting in the moon. That's lucky.
So lucky! Oh my gosh! So yeah, that was interesting. But the movie itself,
I mean, it's a little early in the season, but I'm going to call it a Christmas miracle.
I'm with you. I liked the movie. It was a very good tribute to Chadwick Boseman. There's a couple things that I was just kind of meh on, but overall, I really did enjoy Black Panther.
It did great at the box office, like $180 million, or something like that.
It broke a record because I think before that it was Divergent. No, Mockingjay.
Oh, for like an October or for a November opening.
For a November opening, yeah. That held the record. And then I was scrolling through HBO, and like at the very top it popped up that Don't Worry Darling was on, and I was like, oh, whatever. I've been meaning to watch this, and I was like, well, it's not in theaters anymore, might as well give it a try. It's free. It was not what I was expecting. They threw it was good. It did not go the direction I was thinking at all. I was like, oh, okay. So I recommend it. And then I really, really, really recommend Where the Crawdads Sing. It's on Netflix now.
Yeah, it just got to Netflix like in the last couple of days, right?
Yes. That movie, I thought about that movie for like 2 days after I watched it.
Oh, wow. So it's a thinker movie.
I
mean, it makes you think. It's not
it's a reflective movie. Like, wow.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, more like Black Panther is sort of like that popcorn, like gonna have a great time, great 3 hours, but you're probably not gonna walk out like questioning things about your life.
Exactly. You'll if you're into the comics, you'll do some comparisons because they introduce another comic book character, and you'll see how that compares to what you know about the character or whatever for Black Panther. Mm-hmm. Where the Crawdads Sing, it really does make you just reflect on like life and this person's life. And again, it was not a movie that I knew much about because the trailers don't really show much except for a girl living in a marsh. So you're like, meh. Yeah. I don't really think.
I mean, this could go a lot of directions.
Exactly. So I was like, well, sure, whatever. It's free. But I really, really enjoyed it.
And it had some Oscar buzz too, didn't it?
It did, and I can see why.
And it feels like one of those movies where like there are certain movies that just do not lend themselves to a 30-second or even a 2-minute trailer.
Yeah.
Like Black Panther lends itself. There's going to be a good guy. There's going to be a bad guy. Maybe the lines will get blurred. There's going to be some stuff we know, some stuff we don't. Special effects, boom, boom, probably one car chase. That's a trailer. Mm-hmm. But when you don't have a lot of those elements, then a trailer can be really hard to put together. Because how many times has a trailer like made you think the movie was one thing and then you went and watched it and you're like, that was not what I expected. Yeah. Like you were saying with Don't Worry Darling. Like one, because of the drama surrounding it and how it didn't go over well with like the press and it became this whole like social media thing. It's a movie that I probably would go see because I really enjoy Florence Pugh. But because of all that nonsense, I was like, nah, I don't want to be a part of it. But I didn't give it a chance because of the nonsense, but I have no idea what it was about.
I think that like you said, I think the nonsense kind of made me go, let's see what this is about. And Harry Styles actually I think this is only like his second, third acting gig because he's got My Policeman in there.
Yeah.
So for someone who's not a seasoned actor to have such a major role, I thought he did really well.
I mean, it helps when you sleep with the director, so.
Well, that's true.
I mean, that'll get you cast, probably.
But it doesn't change his acting ability. He actually is
true.
A decent actor.
Well, he seems like a very charming, he's not ugly to look at.
There is that. So yeah. Of the three, if I had to rank them, in terms of artistic value, I guess I would say Crawdads, Black Panther, Don't Worry, but I would recommend any of them.
So especially since Don't Worry Darling, it's free on HBO, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you subscribe to HBO Max, I mean, I guess that's not free, but
right, if
you're
you
paying
subscribe,
for it
it's
anyway.
part of the subscription. So
yeah.
Same with Crawdads. If you subscribe to Netflix, it's part of the subscription. So I'm actually surprised to see that on Netflix because it's been a long time since Netflix has added a non-Netflix movie.
Yeah, so they really dove full into like all original stuff.
Yeah,
and they're like, hey, making movies and TV shows is not cheap.
Right.
Maybe we should just put some other stuff on there too.
Maybe let's go back to adding other people's stuff as well. But
and that's why I've been really excited. I don't know if it's been a choice, but Amazon buying what used to be like IMB TV, and now it's Freevee, but it's Amazon's Freevee, and it's got more and more of this old stuff on there. It feels like those other things are popping up that are kind of filling the gaps, and so you're getting to see like the stuff that used to be on Netflix or used to be on Amazon Prime when it first came out, or Hulu. It's got a place again, but they're all these like sub companies of the bigger companies, so it's still out there somewhere, but it's so expensive to make movies that at some point they got to be like, man, there's a lot of movies that have already been made that we don't have to pay for.
Put these on there.
Yeah, like you're saying, it's funny because the pendulum, I think we were talking last week about how it used to be, you got appointment television, like MASH was the number one TV series of all time for ratings for the finale because you could only watch it that evening at that time. There wasn't like at that point VCRs weren't even really around, so like nobody was recording stuff. Like if you missed it, you missed it. Whereas then got into streaming and it's like binge watch anything you want. But now they're kind of getting back to, again, last week I was talking, when we record on Wednesdays, I always make myself wait for, usually it's the Disney Plus series which come out on Wednesday. So right now it's Andor season 11 or episode 11 is out, but I make myself wait till we're done with the podcast before I watch it, so I have like a little reward at the end. It's like when you were in baseball and
I did
you were like,
good.
afterwards we'll get some ice cream. Yeah. Or hey, you didn't cry today, so get some ice cream after the game. Not that I cried at every baseball game, I must say.
But you did.
Like one time.
Are you sure? Because your parents do listen.
It wasn't every time, but there were some days when I did not want to play, and they were like, "Hey, we'll get ice cream afterwards," and I'll be like, "All right, let's do it." You got me.
What about you? Did you see anything this past weekend?
I have been just working a lot, so I have my shows that I can put on in the background while I'm writing reports and collating data and going through spreadsheets. So I have been almost all the way through the Unforgettable season. And there's 4 seasons. I only thought there were 3, but there's 4. So I'm halfway through now. I've watched all of seasons 1 and 2, and I'm about halfway through 3. So that's come on. Got back into Star Trek Enterprise because I tried to watch the new Quantum Leap, and the entire time I was like, this is fine. It's kind of the same way I felt about Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum PI and like the MacGyver reboot.
Yeah,
those were always so tied in with the lead characters that it was okay, but it wasn't the same. And so I tried watching Quantum Leap, and I did not make it through an episode. because it just
So
felt
is
so
the
weird.
premise the same? Have they gone in to rescue the old crew? Like, what is the new? Like, why did we need this?
Because they were like, hey, the other one was successful and those people are now adults with money, so they'll maybe watch the same show again. It's really all I got. I mean, I don't, doesn't feel like they did anything all that new with it. It's a much more diverse cast, which is good because it was just a bunch of white people in the original, which was needed. But I mean, I was like, you know what? I just need some Scott Bakula. So I'm just going to go watch Star Trek Enterprise for a couple episodes because I can kind of check in on that and check out and not have to be as engaged. I've sat down because now my list is getting so long of shows that I need to start. But there are a lot of ones that I really need to pay attention to. Like I have been told, do you watch Yellowstone?
No, and everybody keeps telling me I need to.
Right. And I like Costner. I was like, cool, I should really probably get into that. A new season started, so like that would be a good time to start. This new show with Sylvester Stallone, Tulsa King, which is made by the same guy, but it's basically like a mob thing where this guy, this Goomba has been in jail for like 20 years, and then he gets back out and he's like, hey, I'm ready to go back to work. Where are you gonna put me? And they're like, how about Tulsa? Because they really because they were like, go to Tulsa. And he like, sort of a fish out of water thing. That looks good. You've got the Peripheral, which I've been wanting to watch with Chloe Grace Moretz, which looks great, and then a brand new one with Emily Blunt. It's a Western that just came out.
Oh yeah,
yes, it's like the
preview for it. Like not the preview. I saw like a poster board. Like
it's like the English. Duh, she's English. But it's very much a Western drama sort of thing. And I was like, I want to start this. Started that. Like the opening thing was this really intense monologue, and I'm like, I have no emotional bandwidth for this right now. So instead, we will go and watch something completely different.
Instead, we'll watch Murder She Wrote again.
Go back to Murder She Wrote. I am very much caught up on like the only active show I'm watching is it's NCIS. But then I was like, you know what? I need like some comfort television. So I was like, I know they did the reboot of Law and Order, so I'll dive into that. And I go on to Peacock, and the first episode's like, this is part 3 of a 3-part series involving both Law and Order Special Victims and Law and Order Organized Crime. And I'm like, oh God, like I gotta go find them and watch those. And I know I sound like exceptionally old right now, but it was like,
just too much work to watch television.
There's just so many options. So then I'm like, okay, wait. There's a new Jack Ryan series coming out in December. So I will rewatch the first 2 seasons of the John Krasinski Jack Ryan series, well, season 1 and season 2, and then season 3, which is coming, also star Wendell Pierce. And I have been reading rave reviews of his performance on Broadway in the revival of Death of a Salesman. They're talking like Tony level success. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So I then started watching that again. So when I tried to watch the new stuff, I got overwhelmed and just went back and continued to watch stuff that I've already seen, which actually I've read is a symbol of both depression and ADHD. So it's pretty spot on.
All right.
You search for comfort in the things that you have seen before.
Well, that sounds a bit on brand, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I have watched my 2 new shows that are watching are NCIS and Andor, and they've both been pretty good this year. And what episode are we on?
We are 117, so I get
117.
Don't you try to
that's why I stopped
your way into the A side right now.
Because I was about to segue. And just like the owner of the Segway who died on the Segway, I was like, maybe I should slow down.
Yes, this is 117, which means I get to start this week. So are we ready to jump in?
I'm ready if you're ready.
I'm ready. All right, here we go. Well, this week, so last week we talked about the Amazon review killer. Did you ever go back and try to find? I know you said you wanted to try to find some of the reviews. I don't know if you actually did.
I found a lot of articles that showed them and like really grainy screenshots. I could not find them on Amazon, which doesn't shock me because I'm sure Amazon was like, we're going to edit those out because, and also Amazon, there are so many things on there where like I've purchased before. Like I got this really nice glove and hat, and then like this it's not a scarf, but it's like a hat with a hole in it, so you can pull it all the way down. So like you don't have to tie it, but it works as like a neck warmer. I guess you would call it a neck warmer. And I got this like 3-pack, and I'm like, this is really nice. I was like, I'm gonna go and look and maybe get this little 3-pack again for a gift. And they're like, no, the one you purchased is never to be sold again. But here are like 19. Here are 19 similar products. So I'm sure that like the stuff he reviewed, that listing has been changed just ever so slightly to be a different one, because it's really hard to buy the same thing twice unless it's a subscription, and then you just end up not canceling stuff. And that's how Adam has like 19 deodorants ready to go at any time, because I was like, I'll burn through these pretty quick, and then you don't realize how you don't use stuff as quickly as you think you do, and then the next one's already showing up. I had to skip my dog's food, which is delivered every 2 weeks, because I'm like, we go through this about every 2 weeks, right? And then I realized evidently we don't, because now I have 3 bags instead of 2.
Oh man. All right, so this week we are heading to some national parks, some national forests, and we are going to be talking about Gary Michael Hilton. So Gary Hilton was born November 26, 1946 in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's been alleged he had a pretty rocky childhood. From there, he joined the military, he went into the army, and he was a paratrooper. He ended up on discharge in 1967 after being diagnosed with schizophrenia.
I mean, you got to be a little crazy to jump out of a perfectly good plane, but that was probably a little too much crazy.
So Gary, this is where we start with Gary. So his motive was stalking hiking trails across the South looking for his victims. He has at least 4 confirmed victims, but he's suspected of more deaths. So we don't know a whole lot about Gary once he gets out of the military, but we know he has a penchant for the murder. His first victim was 26-year-old Rosanna Miliani, who was from Miami, and she was last seen December 7th of 2005 near Bryson City, North Carolina, at a convenience store buying backpacks. She was seen with an older gentleman, like in his 60s, who claimed to be a pastor. How does that even come up in a conversation at the convenience store while you're buying backpacks? Hey everybody, I'm okay.
If you're wearing like the collar,
probably not. He's hiking.
I mean, that would not be fun to hike it.
No. He stole her bank card, and he ended up beating her to death. He wasn't actually connected to her death until years later, after he's arrested. When he's arrested, a store clerk finds out about his arrest. This clerk, his name is Steve Siskey. He gets in touch with police, and he notes similarities between Rosanna and another victim that we're going to talk about in a little bit, named Meredith. On December 3rd of 2006, 46-year-old Sunday school teacher Cheryl Hodge Dunlap, who was a resident of Crawford, Florida, she didn't show up for her job at Florida State University in Tallahassee, where she was a nurse. Cheryl had gone to read outside of Florida's, hopefully I can say this right, Apalachicola National Forest. So of course, when she didn't show up for work, her colleagues were like, wait, this isn't normal. So the next day, she doesn't show again. They report her missing. So police go looking, and her car is found. Her abandoned car is found. It was a white Toyota Camry, and it was found just north of the county line. Approximately 5 days after she's reported missing, a search party of about 180 people get organized to try to help find her. Initially, they weren't able to find anything, but people were still like, they had hope upon hope upon hope that they were going to be able to find her alive. Well, about 2 weeks later, on December 16th, a hunter who was passing through the Apalachicola forest named Ronnie Rentz, he's going through the forest with his dogs, and he finds the body of a decomposing white female who had been decapitated. He immediately reports his findings to the authorities. Initially,
so instead of finding 180 people. They just needed like 2 dogs.
They just needed the dog, like
Telling you, dogs are better than people.
in every way, literally every way. So initially they were not sure if that was her because one, they can't identify her because she doesn't initially they couldn't identify her because she didn't have a head, her body's decomposing. So she's sent to the medical examiner who was able to confirm via DNA profiling that it was Cheryl Dunlop. Her death's classified as a homicide, and so authorities say, okay, here's what we know. There was a suspicious green truck seen in the area around the time she disappeared, and it was driven by a man, an older man, who ended up using her ATM card more than 5 times in Tallahassee and took out more than $700 from her account. So over the next few days, a bunch of tips come into the police. Some were about a strange homeless man with a dog who's driving a green 2001 Chevy Astro van, but that doesn't lead anywhere. Then there's rumors circulating that a serial offender was going between Georgia and Florida. So at the same time, the Leon County Sheriff's Office state that they're investigating a case that they think this case is an isolated homicide. They don't think it's related to anything else. So they're like, you can stop with the speculation. This is an isolated case. A little.
And also you got to think that even if they did, they're going to be like, no, we don't have a serial killer.
Right, because who wants to freak people out, right?
Yeah, you want to cause a panic.
Right. So on October 21st of 2007, we've got John and Irene Bryant, who were avid hikers. They lived in Horseshoe, North Carolina, and they had gone for a hike through the Pisgah National Forest, and they had left they drove a Ford Escape, and they left it parked at the Yellow Gap, which was near US Route 276. Well, when their family doesn't hear from them for a while, they get really worried and they report the couple missing to the Henderson County Sheriff's Office, who immediately launches an investigation looking for the Bryants. They get more than 30 volunteers, they get cadaver dogs and a helicopter. I guess they kind of learned.
Well, they were like, we don't need 180 people, we just need 2 dogs. And somebody else was like, well, we got a helicopter. Like,
yeah. They get a hold of their phone records because they're missing, so they're able to do that. They learned that Irene's phone had attempted to call 911, but the signal dropped. The signal was off and the call was dropped. So about 3 weeks later, on November 10th, the search party, they find the body of a woman covered in leaves on what's called Barnett Branch Trail. Well, of course, this is an area where people knew that Irene and John were missing, so they suspect that this is probably Irene, and they send the body to the state medical examiners to perform an autopsy. 3 days later, her body is positively identified as Irene. She had been bludgeoned to death with a blunt object. So now it's considered a federal crime because it was a homicide that had been committed on federal land. So the FBI gets involved and they launch an investigation, and they offer a reward of $10,000 to anybody that can provide information that could bring the killer to them. Also, while all of this discovery is going on, it's been discovered that a bank card that had belonged to the couple had been used to withdraw $300 from an ATM in Ducktown, Tennessee. Now, that's Tennessee to North Carolina. Based on when my daughter was driving back and forth, that's at least a 6-hour drive. There are surveillance cameras at ATMs. Obviously, we know this if you've been to an ATM ever. And the video shows an older white male wearing a yellow rain jacket, but he had a hood that obscured his face. At this time, her husband, John, was still considered a missing person, and they thought whoever had taken Irene had taken John as well. So we fast forward about 3 more months, February 3rd of 2008, another hunter finds a skull in the Nantahala National Forest, which is just off of a service road called the Switchbacks. His name is Mark Waldrop. So he calls a local deputy for assistance. And then the two like are investigating the scene. And then while they're like looking through the area, they discover a pelvis and a spine that was about 20 yards from the skull. There's no clothing, no identification. So they send the bones to the medical examiner for identification. About 2 days later, they identify that the bones to be that of John Bryant. So just before Hunter Mark discovers the body of John Bryant, well, Gary Hilton is taking action again. On New Year's Day of 2008, Meredith Hope Emerson, she decided she wanted to go hiking along a trail called Freeman Trail on what I would never probably visit just because the name freaks me out, Blood Mountain.
But you also know there are people that would simply because of the name.
I know.
Like I could tell, like when I was like in high school, there'd be somebody in my group that'd be like, "Man, we should go to Blood Mountain." And I'd be like, "Well, that sounds horrible," but yeah. I mean, not that I was that's a real story, but I can totally see it happen.
Yeah. So 24-year-old Meredith, she's hiking on Blood Mountain in Vogelsig Park, and she's got her dog Ella with her. And several people saw Ella and Meredith hiking on the trail, but they also saw an older white male with a dog following them. So about 3 days later, on January 3rd, authorities find a 1995 Chevy Cavalier, and inside was a water bottle, a dog leash, and a police baton. Well, when they look into who was with Meredith that day, they find that 61-year-old Gary Hilton, he was a known local drifter. He was known for his strange behavior and violent temper. He was often seen walking with his dog Dandy along that same Freeman Trail on Blood Mountain. Well, now he's a person of interest because they're like, wait a minute, this is all fitting, older white male, older white male, older white male. So police request an interrogation. They want to interrogate him. So a day after they announced that they want to interrogate him, they find Meredith's dog Ella wandering in a Kroger parking lot. Ella is returned to Meredith's family members. On January 5th, authorities find in a dumpster near a Quick Trip a bunch of Meredith's belongings. Her clothing that had blood on it, her wallet, her driver's license, a University of Georgia ID card, and a seatbelt that had blood on it that had been.
You don't just usually find seatbelts without cars.
No, you don't. So hours after police find these items of Meredith's, Gary Hilton is arrested. At the same time they're finding these items, or around the same time, there are some anonymous phone calls that come into the police station that say that he was vacuuming his local van outside of a local establishment. So they got this tip that he's vacuuming. They find all this stuff. Plus they say, oh, he was with Meredith on this trail, or somebody that looked to be like him. So they arrest him. He's taken to the county jail where he is charged with kidnapping based on the evidence that was that they found that connected into the case. He's also being held. He's transferred because they take him to a federal prison in Atlanta because of the crime.
In fact, it was national parks.
Because it's federal land. So they, while he's being held, they search for Meredith's body in the area of the Chattahoochee National Forest. Well, they look in his van. It's the same 2001 Chevy Astro that had been reported by witness tips, and they notice that it's missing a car seatbelt. The one that the seatbelt that was found with Meredith's belongings. So guess who's in trouble? Yeah. So he's hit with all these charges. So he decides, okay, I'm hit with all these charges. I'm facing the death penalty. He's hit with the charge of kidnapping, murder. So he says, I'm going to take a plea deal. He agrees to reveal where he disposed of Meredith's body if they'll drop the death penalty against him. So he takes investigators to the Dawson Forest Management area where he tells them her head's not going to be with her.
Okay.
He was in fact correct. She had been decapitated, but the coroner, in a postmortem examination, he was able to determine that it was, in fact, Meredith. He had forced her to camp with him for several days, all while promising her that he was going to let her go if she just gave up her bank info, which she, in fact, did. He did not let her go, though, and he beats her with the police baton that they had found in the car. He then left her covered by leaves and brush. He said he couldn't bring himself to kill her dog, Ella, because they had spent a good few days together. So he pleads guilty to her murder, and he's sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. In September of 2009, a hiker found camping supplies that they believe belonged to Gary Hilton. They then turned those supplies over to police because he's got another trial coming up, the Cheryl Dunlap trial. About a month later, Florida prosecutors charged Gary Hilton with Cheryl Dunlap's murder, claiming that there was evidence linking him to her murder. He tries to fight extradition, but he loses. He's brought to Leon County from Georgia, from the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification State Prison, and he awaits trial. So the prosecutors claim that Gary had abducted Cheryl from the Leon Sinks geological area and held her captive for 2 days before he killed her and then decapitated her. He had also attempted to get rid of any evidence by burning her head and hand in a fire before he dumps the rest of her body in the forest. So his defense team claims that there was no forensic proof, but the prosecutors reminded them that Gary had claimed on tape that he had disposed of her body, and now he was just trying to distance himself from it. It took 4 hours for the jury to deliberate, and they found him guilty on 3 out of 4 charges, with a recommendation to impose the death penalty. On February 22nd of 2011, he was officially sentenced to death for the murder of Cheryl Dunlap. In 2012, he is brought to trial for the 3rd time for the murders of John and Irene Bryant. Well, as part of that plea deal he had made, he admitted the guilt, and he's sentenced to an additional life term without the chance of parole. So now we've got life with the possibility of parole, we've got life without the possibility of parole, and we've got the death penalty. During the hearings, he described how he killed Irene on the spot and then kidnapped John to get his bank information. He extorted him, and then he ended up shooting him with a .22 Magnum before dumping it. During the trial, criminal profilers from the FBI and different agencies across the country, they showed up to the trials and they wanted to interview Gary Hilton. According to criminologist Eric Hickey, Gary Hilton was most likely responsible for several other homicides before 2007. In 2018, Gary Hilton unsuccessfully attempted to overturn his death sentence, citing that his defense team was dysfunctional and ineffective. Both state and federal authorities denied his appeal. He is currently still sitting on death row. He also, we mentioned the other victims, he is suspected but has not been properly linked to the murder of Judy Smith, who was 51, on September 7th of 1977. Several human bones and personal items were found in the Pisgah National Forest that were scattered near a campground. Judy was eventually identified by another hiker who had last seen Judy in Philadelphia 5 months earlier. Also, Michael Scott Lewis, who was 27, of South Daytona, he went missing November 21st of 2007. A few weeks after he went missing, his dismembered remains were found by a fisherman in Ormond Park. They had been put into black bags and dumped in the Tumaca River. The remains were not immediately identified. It took a couple of days in a lab in California. Unfortunately, his head was never located. Authorities have stated that Gary Hilton still remains a suspect in this murder, but they have not been able to completely tie him to this murder. Michael Scott Lewis's girlfriend at the time, Nelsie Tetley, was later arrested and was supposed to stand trial in 2017 for the murder and the dismemberment of her boyfriend, Jeffrey Albertson. So she is also considered a viable suspect in the case.
That sounds pretty viable.
Yeah.
When the second boyfriend ends up dead in a similar way, I mean, I'm not saying it's the same, but it's pretty big hit.
Either way it goes, they both kind of could be a suspect because he's known for dismembering and decapitation, and now she's known for dismemberment. So
I'm sure that every state attorney within the Eastern Seaboard, if they had to a decapitated person in a park, they were like, well, could be our guy.
Yeah. But there you go. That's the story of the National Forest serial killer, Gary Hilton, who remains on death row to this day.
And so I learned a very important thing in this whole story, and it is another reason that I have when people ask me a very specific question, because all of these people got decapitated and it took days to identify their remains, right?
Mhm.
Because they didn't have their head. Because you
Mhm.
talk about, one, you can see somebody's face, you can check their dental records, but that will never be a problem with me because I have tattoos.
Ah, yes, I do as well.
So I will be immediately, and mine are unique. It's
Mhm.
not just like a heart that says mom. There are more than one. So I now can say when someone's like, "Why'd you get a tattoo?" I'm like, because if I get decapitated, you'll know it was me.
Able to identify me.
You'll be able to identify. We're not going to waste any time because we know if you waste time, it's harder to find the killer. So I'm really just looking out for the police in this instance.
But there you go. That is the B side.
So on the A side this week, last week we had talked about no murder, on the A side. This is the murder-free part of the show, where we just talk about random things as a palate cleanser. So if you have dry mouth like me and drinking water all the time, you have something to cleanse the palate as well. Last week I mentioned that we hadn't really done a that guy from that show in forever. And part of it's because I feel like I've just been watching so much of the same stuff that nothing's really surprising me in the same, because I'm not watching as many, new shows as I probably should be. I'm rewatching a lot of stuff. And there haven't been, Andor is a relatively small cast, but also like there's not a lot of really recognizable people. Andy Serkis, of course, and then Stellan Skarsgård as well, but haven't been a lot. And then, of course, on Monday night, I was out doing family stuff. My son had his first sports banquet of high school, so we got to do like the everybody brings stuff for a taco bar, and then everybody sits in the gymnasium on tables or on lunch tables like a high school, and you do the whole awards thing. So I was out Monday night. I got home. Also, not surprisingly, but cross country kids can eat a lot of tacos.
Oh yeah.
We went like
yeah,
I
you're
alone.
Talking adolescent boys
And girls who routinely run long distances. And we had, so I, myself as my portion, I brought 2 pounds of guac and 4 bags of lettuce. And that was in each of those areas of food, that was 1 of 4. So we had like 8 pounds of guacamole that disappeared. I was very impressed. Like I even was like, oh, well, maybe it'll be some guac to bring home. There was nothing. It was like locusts came, the plague of teenagers. I was just really impressed. But I was out that evening, so I came home, and NCIS comes out on Monday night. So I usually watch it when I get home from being out on Mondays. And I booted up NCIS. The new episode had come out. There'd been a couple weeks where they hadn't had one, so I was very excited. And then almost immediately, about 10 minutes into the episode, all of a sudden a guy pops up, and I look at him and I go, I know this guy, but I don't know him in the character he's playing, because he was just sort of a one shot. I think he was in 3 scenes in the entire episode. But it was one of those moments where I was like, I know this guy, and I think I know who it is. And it's kind of weird because I recognize him from earlier seasons of NCIS, and also the show that spawned NCIS way back in the 90s. I said, well, I'm going to investigate this. So in the most recent episode of NCIS, which is entitled Love Lost, there is a character by the name of Oliv Kozlov, who is a Russian who runs an underground casino in the back of a pawn shop. And he's got a white beard and white hair, and he's absolutely unrecognizable from the other characters that this actor has played. The actor's name is Patrick Loborto, and he's best known for being on JAG, which I often forget that JAG was actually the series that spun off NCIS. JAG, of course, was the Navy courtroom drama from the mid-90s. And in the mid-90s, Patrick Loborto played the sort of sidekick to the main, super good-looking guy character. I'm trying to think of what his name was. but a Lieutenant Bud Roberts Jr. He was the junior defense lawyer who was involved in the JAG offices, and he helped spin off NCIS in the early 2000s, was on a couple of episodes, but he's completely unrecognizable in this most recent episode as Oleg, except in his eyes. And even though he's using a very fake Russian accent, you can tell from his voice that it's the same guy as well. Of course, JAG ran from 1995 through 2005. It started out on NBC and then moved to CBS, which was, even then, that was sort of a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
And it started David James Elliott, who just had that like classic Hollywood leading man looks.
That classic jawline and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like this guy you could see him playing Superman, just like that sort of archetype character. And then the highly underrated Catherine Bell, who was on there as well. And I was like, well, this is great. Well, we'll talk about Patrick Laborto a little bit. And he's been around for quite a while. His first television role was all the way back in the early 70s as a child actor. So he's been acting for, at this point, 50 years, basically. But then you start seeing the things that pop up. In 1974, one of his first movie roles was as a child actor playing the role of Peter in Mame, which starred another favorite of the A-side, which of course was Angela Lansbury. He showed up in a lot of Mark Harmon 80s movies, including Summer School. He was in Heathers. He was in another movie that we've talked about on the A-side, Three Ninjas. So it's kind of amazing that this has not happened before. This guy was popping up in everything. He's still acting. He's been around he's mostly a TV actor. He's been in episodes of things from Little House on the Prairie, Starsky and Hutch, The Love Boat, 21 Jump Street, the series, not the movie, Spider-Man, Lois and Clark, The Adventures of Superman, which I think we've talked about as well, JAG. He was even on Godzilla, the series, which was an animated series that continued the story from the 1996 Godzilla movie, or 98 Godzilla movie, which was horrible with Matthew Broderick, but then they just turned it into a cartoon on the weekends, which I remember watching. Of course, he was in JAG and NCIS. He showed up on an episode of Living Single. He's been on CSI, Ghost Whisperer, Dexter. This is the type of guy where I now, of course, again, Castle, and one of your favorites, Scandal, as well. Yes. When I was a young actor, I wanted to be, Michael J. Fox or Matthew Broderick. And then when I got to, college, I was like, man, I kind of want to be like Ed Norton and Tim Roth and take off these gritty, intense roles. Now that I am a pudgy middle-aged man, this is the career I want. To show up in episodes of really cool shows, often as like a office worker or officer number 5, or literally he was in Dexter and his character is just cook, but in parentheses, sandwich shop. So there must have been more than one cook in this episode without a name. So he was that specific. This is the career that I someday want to have. And as my kids are now reaching college age, I can finally move on to the second, part of my life, which is going to be going back to being an actor and I want to be that guy in Law and Order that's taking the box off the trucks, like John Mulaney talks about, where he's more concerned about getting the boxes off the truck or getting the truck packed than he is getting interviewed by the cops. So this is my goal. And Patrick Laborto, somebody that you would immediately recognize, and all the links will be on our website, so you can check out his IMDb, his Wikipedia, and you'll immediately go, hey, I do know that guy. But watch the episode of NCIS that came out just a few days ago, and you will barely recognize him in a complete character transformation. And I was like, this is great. I'm going to do this whole thing on Patrick Laborto. He's got a great career. But then as I'm looking at the episode, I realized, wait a second. This episode not only has that guy from that show, but the main character in this specific episode of NCIS, the who the story revolves around, is an even better that guy from that show, who is an author, and whose book, I got a twofer, whose book I have heard about in the past and is on its way to me from Amazon, because it is about auditioning. And as I am looking to get back into doing regular theater and trying to get back in, my oldest is certainly in that thing right now, the audition scene of going to college and that whole thing if you're looking into theater. I was very excited to also discover that the lead character, Michael Kristoff, who's another absolute that guy that from that show, where you immediately see him and you're like, I know this guy. He's been in so many shows, and there is a ability when you are a not, David James Elliott, not the amazing jawline, you're sort of like the Jason Alexander type, where you can hit a spot in your life from a physical transformation, and then you're just that guy forever until you go like completely gray. And even then, you're kind of the same guy. And so I was like, here's another person that I can model my second, half of my life after. He's been in everything from, of course, the most recent episode of NCIS, but he goes all the way back to 1989's Return from the River Kwai, which was unreleased in the US. He's in Liar Liar. He's in a very small role in what is my favorite Shia LaBeouf movie, Eagle Eye, where he plays the jeweler at the beginning of the film who's involved. He's also been more on TV. So if you go back to TV, you've got Knots Landing, General Hospital, News Radio, a show I completely forgot about but absolutely love, Dharma and Greg. He was on the short-lived Gina Davis show. He showed up on Felicity, The King of Queens, Malcolm in the Middle, The Wire, The West Wing, 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter, and 8 Simple Rules, ER, Boston Legal, Veronica Mars, Charmed, The Closer, Life Without a Trace, which we mentioned last week, and that's why I recognized him last week. Without a Trace was a couple weeks ago, but that popped up. I was like, wait a second, I knew I'd seen him something recently, and it was Without a Trace. Eli Stone, Cold Case, Party Down, which I'm going to do an entire A-side on Party Down, because in my opinion, it is one of the most slept on and unknown little beautiful shows that was it was 2010, so it was on the early sort of streaming world, and it wasn't on a major network, and so it got kind of lost, but it is so good, and the cast is amazing. So we will do an entire bit on that show down the line. But Party Down, Weeds, of course, Law and Order, Blue Bloods, The Good Wife, Gotham, The Blacklist, Elementary, Bosch, Luke Cage. Guy's been everywhere. And he has a huge career on stage as well. And the book that he wrote, which is on the way, that I'm going to read and then also pass on to my oldest as they're going through the audition scene, is called Audition Psych 101. And it's how to turn auditioning, which can be one of the most terrifying experiences to go through, to something that can be fun. And I always try to use the thought when I talk to my oldest, or when I talk to friends or anybody else who's auditioning, I'm like, you have to treat every audition as an opportunity to perform. You get the opportunity to perform for the casting director, or one or two people who then pass you on to the casting director. Then you perform for them. And then if you're lucky enough to get cast, then rehearsal is just another chance to perform, but this time your audience is cast with you all the way through to doing your final show and you're taking the bow. But everyone is a unique opportunity to perform, and it's not supposed to be a scary thing. It's a gift and not something that everybody gets. And that's where I try to put my brain at when I audition. But I'm very excited to listen to, or to read this book and figure out where this is actually a class that he's taught in New York City that's been around for years. And it should be a lot of fun. The link will also be on our website as well. So somehow, when I was just getting home, marveling at the appetites of high school cross-country runners and relaxing and watching my weekly show, I stumbled onto not only a twofer with two guys from, that guy from that show, but also a brand new book to read that I will now add to my ever-growing pile of books that need to be read as well. So it's pretty great when you get basically four things, because I was enjoying an episode of my favorite show, all out of 45 minutes of television gold. So you'll be able to check out the backgrounds of both Patrick Liberto and I'm going to destroy his name, Michael Kostoff, as well, on our website. All the links will be up there. His book is available on its own website and also on Amazon as well. And if you have Peacock, you can go, not Paramount Plus, my bad, Paramount Plus, which is the CBS version, you can go and immediately watch last week's or Monday's episode of NCIS and see these two gentlemen in action. And you will be especially shocked at how you immediately recognize Patrick as Olive, but you don't recognize him looking like that. And it will drive you to the internet as well. So that is the A-side, a twofer plus a brand new book, all from 45 minutes of quality TV. And don't tell me that TV rots your brain, because I've been energized by one episode.
I haven't heard you this excited about that guy from that show in a minute.
I mean, I've got two new role models to try to model my second life after. So this is pretty exciting. And speaking of that guy from that show, we've talked about Warwick Davis many episodes ago. Of course, was integral in so many Star Wars shows, and his continuation of the story of Willow is coming to Disney Plus very soon as well. So there's like a fifth thing of that guy from that show.
All right. Love it. All right. So is that the A side?
That's the A side, because I can't squeeze anything else out of 43 minutes of TV.
All right. You know the deal. Of course, the big thing is please like, subscribe. Adam, take it away.
So go to our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. You can get all the information on there. You can subscribe on all of the streaming platforms that you listen to podcasts on. And if you are like some of our other listeners who have recently listened to an episode and been shocked by some of the things I said, specifically that I will never eat a pickle, and if I'm kidnapped and say I like pickles, that's a signal to you that pickles are bad, and would like to mock me about that, feel free to shoot over messages and pictures of pickles, because I'm feeling like a single lady on Tinder with all the pickle pictures I've been getting recently. Check those out. You can go and look at our merch stuff. We should probably have a pickle-based t-shirt coming soon.
I gotta think of it. Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah. That would be perfect. You can also send us information if you have a murder or mystery or a true crime that you would like to hear more about, or you think is really cool, maybe from your local area that doesn't get talked about as much, and you'd like Brooke to look into it. We would certainly love that information. Mock me for my pickle hatred, or send me the movie that you just saw that you think that I should see, or that guy, your favorite, that guy or that gal from that show. And we love all of your feedback. And of course, you can buy Brooke a coffee, because if you can hear how fast I'm talking right now, just imagine having to edit that and all the things that you didn't hear. Because when I'm talking this fast, there's going to be a lot of, misstatements and slurring and all that sort of stuff. Brooke has to go through and clean all of that up. So she can use all the coffee she could get. And her favorite coffee place, I just learned this, her favorite coffee place does not open early enough in the morning, which I think is an absolute crime. So another way to help her deal with that is to buy her a coffee on buyusacoffee.com. Brooke, before my absolute dry mouth takes over and I have to chug an entire thing of water, anything I missed?
No, you got it all. You got it.
That's what I thought. I just like to hear you say that. So.
All right. Well, that's been episode 117. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.